Hey everybody, it's Sam Choate here, and today I'm going to show you how to humanize your Midi drum parts. We're going to work from two different perspectives. One is going to be people like me that own a drum pad or a Midi keyboard and perform their parts to some extent. And then the other is going to be for a lot of us that are pointing and clicking or dragging and dropping Midi drum loops and creating their parts with maybe a mouse and a keyboard. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I've got two of the same Midi drum part. One is here and it's played by me. And then the second is just duplicated, but I quantized it and just regulated the velocity and everything like that. So it's just pretty square. The drum samples that I'm using today are from the Superior Drummer 3 core library. This is the Country Rock Punch, and it sounds like this. Okay, so it's a great sounding kit. I think I swapped out a few of the cymbals and the hi-hat for some things that I just prefer myself, but overall a great preset to get started. So the first one, like I said, was performed by me. I've done nothing to it except just play it on the pad and let it be what it is. So it sounds like this. Okay, and you can kind of think of this as like a verse, pre-chorus, leading into something. So we're gonna nail that build up. And a lot of us only have a closed hi-hat, and an open hi-hat. Sorry, there's just gonna be some bleed into this mic from that, I think. Apologize, I'll work it out later. What I'm going to show you is the importance of building like dynamics with velocity and different samples. So the second one, before we get too far into that, sounds like this. This one is the exact same part, but like I said, it's quantized and the velocity is all set to the same. It's 121. It's just an arbitrary number that's high. So it sounds like this. All right, so as high of quality samples as these are, without doing anything to the velocities, you're still practically getting that machine gun effect in this little snare roll kind of rough thing that you do. Does not sound good, and no drummer would play that way, or even could play that because it's like too perfect. So a couple of the different things that we're going to do, and I think I'm going to start with the robotic to human transformation before I do the slightly too human to a little more polished transition, which is the one I played. So first things first, it's important to do a couple things. One, I think, is thinking like a drummer. So if you could play the drums at all, even if it's just a 4 on the floor pattern or the classic, boots and cats thing where it's like boots and cats and boots and cats and boots and cats, then you can feel how even you are doing that. So for instance, I know that every time the snare hits with my left hand, that I'm hitting that hi-hat just a little bit harder. And I do have a drum set out in the other room that I do play, and so I've been thinking about this stuff a lot because I've been drumming a little bit off and on for years, but I've spent a lot more time programming my drums and trying to get them to sound good. And that's difficult, and it was difficult for me for a long time because we didn't have Superior Drummer or the level of Steven Slate drums that we have, or the Get Good drums or anything like that. I did have Steven Slate drums, but they just weren't at the level they are today. So knowing that, then there's some things that we want to do, starting off with, I think, the hi-hat. We're going to do that first. So our hi-hat pattern is up here, right? So it's actually moving across 2 different samples. And I'll show you what those are, because I remember playing it this way because I thought it would be a good thing to show you. So the 2 samples, the 2 closed hi-hat samples that I have loaded to the board here are the closed tip. Sorry for the boofiness on the mic, man. I really can't do much about that at the moment, but I'll eventually work it out. Hey, you know what I probably could do? I could move the mic over here. I bet that will help quite a bit. A little bit. Okay, so I've got the closed tip, and then I have closed edge. So that's essentially, I'm gonna move this back where it was. Sorry for the weirdness, guys. All right, so the closed edge is an emulation of a drummer hitting, you know, the edge of the hi-hat where it's gonna get a little washier sound, and then the closed tip is you're hitting the top of the hi-hat with the tip of the stick. So you get a much, much tighter sound on the closed versus the edge, and you can use that to your advantage. So if we go back to our Midi, then I think we're starting on the closed. Yep. So it's going. So on each snare, 1, 3, 1, 3, or if you want to count it 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, then each time the snare is hitting on its main beat, I'm hitting that edge instead of the tip, because I know for me as a drummer that each time I play the snare, I'm just naturally going to hit that hi-hat a little bit differently with a little more force. So in addition to automating a different sample, to that, the other thing to keep in mind is that I'm hitting it harder. So it's safe to assume that I can grab all the other hi-hat strikes that are on this closed tip sample. Let me make sure I've got this one grabbed. Yep. And I'm going to bring those down in velocity. And we're just going to do it by ear. So now that might be a little too much because the hi-hat's kind of getting lost in there, but let's go ahead and listen to just the hi-hat without the click. Awesome. Well, that to me is already a big, big difference. Now, my next secret weapon, and this might as well be like the humanize function to me. I'm going to select all this, all these hi-hat hits, and then I'm going to go to event operations and change velocity. Now, you can set all, you can add one, whatever you want to do. Usually I'll select something that doesn't really matter, like adding 1 to it or subtracting 1. Since I played this really hard, I'm going to go ahead and select the subtract 1. It doesn't matter. We're not really using the subtract feature. What I want to do is the randomize feature. And I'm going to do it a small, small number. Not much, but maybe 3, maybe up to 5 or 6. We'll try 5. And we're going to go ahead and apply that. Boom. And instantly what I've done is just slightly mess up the perfection of it. So now what we have is a sound like this. Good. So already that's sounding better and better. So I'm going to go ahead and apply what we've learned now to the snare and the kick on this first portion, and then we'll get into the open hat section of this little part. So down here we have kick. Whoops, sorry, they're still muted. Let me switch over and unmute them. Okay, so we have kick and snare, right? Now, right now it's sounding like this. It's very robotic. It's too much. I hate it. So I'm going to go ahead and select everything. Very metal. And the first thing I'm going to do on this is actually I'm going to subtract a little bit from that because I'm just not a fan of the way that it sounds pretty much at all. So I'm going to do it by 10 right off the bat. We'll go ahead and leave the randomize feature on, but since what I do is I think of it in ratios. So if I'm subtracting 10 and I'm trying to actually change the dynamic of it, then I don't want to randomize it by 5 because that's not going to subtract a very consistent amount. I'm going to lower the randomize part to maybe 3. So think of it as like a ratio of randomizing 3 to 10. You know, if you were subtracting 56, then randomizing by 5 is no big deal, or even 10. But if you're only subtracting 10 and you're randomizing by 5, then that's kind of a wonky, you're going to get some weird results. So again, we're going to do this just real quick, bring that down. And then while I still have it selected, for me on PC, I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to select everything, or rather deselect everything that isn't that main snare hit. So just using, and I'm going to also change the grid right here to make it a little easier to see. So I know that the snare hit is this one that I don't want to deselect. That's a double negative, but who cares? So we're just kind of going through here, being careful to not get that main snare that's on 3. Okay. And then what I'm going to do to that is come back in here and I'm going to add just a little bit back to it. Say 7. I'm not going to randomize this time because I already did, so I'm going to leave it alone. But I'm going to add just a little bit to add a little bit of dynamic. So now instead of just going boo ba ba doo boo ba boo boo ba ba doo boo ba, like we're going to go ba ba doo boo ba boom boom ba ba doo boom ba. So that will be, did I already do that? Yeah, I did. Okay, my bad. It's just going to be more dynamic and more authentic of a performance already. Now, those off hits are just driving me mad. So the benefit of now having all of our main hits selected is we can again hold Shift and then just go straight back through the snare notes. Now we have all of the off hits selected. So now I'm going to go back to the velocities and I'm going to subtract a lot from those. Let's start with 23. I'll go ahead and leave randomize on just on 3, just a little tiny bit. And we're going to do it once and listen. Not a fan. Keep going down. That's getting better. I'll go ahead and do it one more time, but just a little bit less. That's a lot better. And I think on the hi-hat, I'd like it just to kind of play out more. So I'm going to select all of those again. And I'm going to go ahead and beef them up just a little bit. Awesome. Now, the only other thing on this closed hi-hat portion of our part is that back on the snare, I feel like those little ghost notes in between, well, for one thing, they're not really ghost notes. I'm hearing them a lot. They're kind of in the realm of ghost notes, and I'll probably keep referring to them as that just because I'm in the habit of it. Excuse me. The only thing is that I just don't feel like they're being played realistically still. They're too consistent. Like, you just don't play drums like that's just not a real snare drum doesn't react that way, and a dynamic player doesn't play that way. So if I'm thinking about it, like, then I'm thinking that second ghost note of each phrase is going to be slightly less. Awesome. I'm feeling pretty good about this now. Now to the kick. So I'm going to select the first kick of each phrase, which is actually just the kick that's on the downbeat, because all the other ones are not. They're off. They're on upbeats or something similar. I'm going to select those and just give them a slight bit of more power. There we go. Okay. And then the other thing is that I can just tell the way that one might play this would be a little bit different. We're still pretty even across all of the kicks, and that's just not realistic. So we want to add more dynamics in there. And a lot of this, man, is trial and error, experimentation. I've started practicing the drums just about every day. They're not my first instrument. And so if they're not yours too, like, that's okay. And if you don't instantly have the instinct for all this stuff, that's okay too. You know, give yourself a little break and recognize that I've been doing this for a really long time, and a lot of these things have been learning experiences for me, and I've learned through trial and error. So do the same. I'm making this so that hopefully it'll give you some place to start, but don't think that you have to have these instincts as well naturally, because I certainly didn't when I started off. So what I'm going to do is listen one more time. So I feel like this note and this note in the pattern are going to be pretty strong, but I feel like these notes preceding it are not as strong, or shouldn't be as strong, whichever way you want to look at it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn those down. I think 10's probably too much. I'm going to do it by maybe 7. And I like to keep randomized going just because even if it's at a super low note, it just keeps things interesting and imperfect, which is what you want if you're going for something that sounds somewhat real. Awesome. That's sounding really good. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go ahead and move on. Now, on this other area, I had to figure out where my other hi-hat samples were located on the grand keyboard here on the side. Sometimes they're in weird places, so I just thought to do that before the video started so that I wouldn't be hunting around for them. So I'm going to grab these and pull them over here so that we can use them. And I think that pattern starts about right here. I may have moved these. Hold on. Yes, I did. Yeah, they go right about there. So right here, what we have is a transition of open hi-hats. So we have open 1. No, actually, I think that's 3. Open 1. Yeah, open 2. 3, and 4. So that's gradually opening up the hi-hat. So I'm going to turn these back down and just leave them alone for a moment. Did that? Oh, weird. What did I have selected? Who knows? Yeah. Okay, anyways. So if I'm thinking about this in a song, Okay, first I need to do the snare things to this. So real quick, bear with me. I'm going to select all the snares. It's always fun. Now I'm going to deselect the main snare hits. Just get those ghost notes, and I'm going to turn them down manually this time. Very fun. Love that noise. Roughly to about where the other ones were. This is another way you can do it. And then we're going to go in here, randomize just a little bit. And I don't think we really need to subtract that much. So we'll do it something like that. Try not to randomize more than you're trying to turn it down, because again, you get really weird effects that way. Okay, cool. And then the other thing that I did remember is just the second one I thought should be softer. Whoops. That one already is great. Just a little bit. Cool. All right, so now the snare. Awesome. Good to go. Now, the hi-hat. If we're building up, there's a couple different things that I think we ought to do. Number one, and the most important one, is we're not just going to go like closed, closed, open, open, like that on the hi-hat, because it just doesn't sound natural. It doesn't sound real. So if you think about it, then, real quick, I need to fix the fill. I think I'll do that later. If you think about it, then building up needs to happen. So we can't just transition from one thing to the other. So I'm going to do a couple things. Number one, this last snare hit of the previous phrase. This closed hi-hat, I'm going to change that. I want that instead to be slightly open. Yeah. Now it sounds like this. Great. And if you like, it might help for this demonstration just to boost the hi-hat a little bit. Cool. About 2 dB. So again, that sounds like this. Awesome. And I raise that up because we smack it hard when we're about to go into this next phrase. Now we have all these boring, just flat out super open hi-hats. And the first thing we're going to do is change the first 2 phrases, okay? And we're going to change them to something more interesting. Since we used the open 1 sample as our transition one, then I think we should probably use the open 2 one as our psh, 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 psh thing that we're kind of riding on. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to boost this guy up and bring him in here. Okay. And that accounts for the first half of our second part. The way that I'm thinking about this is basically we've got 4 bars here that are closed, 4 bars here that are open, the last of which is a fill. Okay. So the first 2 we're going to make a little bit more subdued as we build up. So starting with this open-ish hi-hat sound, what I want to do is also automate some of the velocity on that. Before I do that, real quick, I got to do the thing that I did with the other kicks, which I think was something like this. I do a lot of this stuff manually, guys. Not all of it's in the quantize tool. I am going to fix this real quick. I'll show you what to do here. All right, we're gonna do a curve. And we're gonna do probably, I tell you what, first we're gonna set all of them lower. With a little bit of randomization, never a bad thing, okay. All right, right off the bat, much lower. Let's hear how that sounds. Great. Then these latter two, I'm gonna turn down quite a bit. You could use the curve on this if you want. I can show you what I might do with that real quick. I'm not sure which way this is gonna go if I want it to go down, so we'll try that out. So 100% of what it currently is down to say probably 25%, like pretty low, and then I'll leave the randomize on doing its thing. Yeah, that's roughly what I wanted it to do. Real quick, let me try it again, see what the curve. Oh, okay, curve is doing the opposite of what I wanted to do. I want it to do this thing. Yes. Okay. Okay. They're too quiet, so I'm gonna add a little bit back. Not randomize them so much. Nice. Awesome. And if you listen slowly, it sounds like you're dragging the snare drum or dragging the stick on the snare drum, which is great. Because that's great. Love that. That sounds awesome now. All right, back to the hi-hat thing. Had to fix that because it was bugging me. So here we have our hi-hat samples. We could experiment by doing this one because that actually sounds pretty similar. So maybe we actually want the one. Let's try that. Nice and sloshy. I think I can get behind that. Okay, let me turn my grid back. Whoops, that's a different one. Okay, now we remember where our snare hits are. So those are gonna be boom, ba, ba-dum, boom, ba. Yeah. Sometimes I get a little confused. So I'm gonna turn these guys down and leave the ones that are on the snare hits. That full power. Gotta make sure to get rid of that guy. And I think overall, I'm gonna turn up the velocity just a little bit. And maybe even squeeze in that gap of velocities a little more, but we'll see. And then we're gonna move up to 2 here. And there's a 3 right there. Sometimes it's good also, like I did on the previous one, to use the last beat of the phrase as a transitional point, because it just lends to it being a little bit more real and imperfect. Okay, and again, we're gonna make sure that every other beat is just a little more. Okay, so how many hits do we have here? And then I think it's safe to say that on that snare hit of the fill here, that's probably, if you think about it, so probably on that one, Yeah, so on this beat, that one, we're gonna make the hi-hat closed. So we actually want one more of these guys and then a closed hat sound, which I think is gonna be up here. Nope. There it is. We just want the pedal sound of the drummer putting his foot down. You don't want to strike there because the drummer only has 2 hands. He doesn't have 3. So you want to be really conscious of stuff like that. There's our buildup. If you want to take it one step further, I'll show you what you can do. So we're going to eliminate these little reminders there. And for our buildup here, what I'm going to do, except for this guy, I'm going to show you a really interesting thing you can do if you want to add that extra little bit of, that wasn't a chef's kiss, that was more like a Hannibal Lecter thing, so a little bit of that. To this, change velocity, we're going to do the curve again, and it's going to be really subtle. So keep in mind the percentages work off of what you've already got going on, and if you look at the velocities, you can see we're close to maxed out. So I'm probably going to start at, say, this is a high energy part. So I'm going to say, I'm going to start at 95% of what they already are. And I'm going to build that up just slightly to, say, 105%, something roughly around there. We're going to see what that does. I think it's going to be cool. I'm not going to do the curve at the moment, just because I don't want to. And then we'll leave randomize on because it's always our friend. All right, super subtle, right? You saw that little change. These guys went up. These guys went down just a little bit. Awesome. That to me is the cherry on top. If you're thinking about, hey, I want to build up here, then of course you can go in and do something really rigid. Let me show you what not to do. What not to do is this. That's just weird. Even if I thought that I was doing that well, say something like this. It's just weird. It's too robotic. It does not sound real at all. Whoops. There we go. I think that's where we, yeah, that's where we left off. Great. So yeah, it's just that tiny, tiny little thing that changed smoothly by percentage, a tad bit of randomization. That's what you want to do. You could even do it again. If you're like, that's a little subtle, just leave the settings alone. Since it's percentage based, it's going to work off of what it's already set at, and it's going to do that decrease increase thing like a teeter totter, but you're going to have the basically 3 to 100, so basically a 3% randomization factor in there as well, which is great. Awesome. I'm going to do a touch more work here on this little rough ghost notey snare thing because I'm just not quite happy with it. And I think the reason might be that I have it quantized to the wrong type of grid, because I think it's a triplet, or I think it should be a triplet. Yeah, because right now it's going ba 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 ba, and what I want it to be is like a ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba. That's kind of the thing that the rhythm that I'm thinking of. So, don't think I need 30-second notes. Nope. Here we go. Let's try this. I think this is what I'm wanting. Awesome. Yeah. Oh God, that's awesome. Absolutely. That sounds great. Let's listen to our originally robotic but now humanized drum part. I think that sounds pretty dang good. What about y'all? If you like what I did, leave a comment letting me know what you thought. And if you didn't like what I did and maybe you have some pointers for me, leave that in the comments too, because I'd love to know. I'm going to take a sip from my mermaid cup real quick. Now, we're going to get into the other one, which is for folks like me and you that either have something like the Akai MPD 226 over here, or I love these keyboards. This is the second one I've owned. I owned the 61 key or 69 key, whichever one it was, for like 10 years. And I only downsized because I just wanted something that would fit on my desk. Love this. It's, you know, my other one had that too. I don't know what it is, but something falling around in there. But these are great. Anyways, fanboy session over. If you're like me and you prefer to play a drum part out on here, or maybe you have a bigger E kit and you play on there and you're like, I'm pretty good, but I just want to tighten things up. This part is for you. Let's get into it. So this is the performance that I did. All right, let's talk about it. First thing is, this is not a super sensitive set of pads. This is great for producing like hip hop music. This is not what I wish it was for finger drumming. It's just not. It's almost there, but it's not. It's sad because I really wish it was. You can see the velocities. I'm a pretty sensitive player, but it just doesn't have the range of sensitivity that I need. And so I end up overplaying it. And just to get the notes to register. And so it's not a very accurate representation of my feel, but it's closer. It's closer than just pointing and clicking. And for me, it gets me there faster. And that's why I do it this way. So you'll notice that the problem is a lot of these velocities are just maxed out. Now, a good thing is over here, this little snare flimity flam thing, the velocities are a lot more accurate to what they would be if an actual drummer had played it. So that's a good thing. Now I rush in some spots. Not everything is perfectly aligned to the grid. I prefer that. So moving on, we're going to take a look at a few of these things. There's some tightening up we can do without ruining the feel. And that's what our goal is here. You can see that I rush a tad going into the fill. Very normal for drummers to do that. I rush a tad towards the end of the phrase. Pretty normal for drummers to do that. What I'm going to do is take this piece by piece and take into account how far ahead of the beats I'm playing. Because overall, if you take the thing overall, it's like, sounds like a drum part. It's not the tightest in the world, but it sounds like a drum part. And it's a lot better, in my opinion, than where we started with the robotic one, where everything was the same velocity, everything is super quantized to the grid, and everything like that. I would take this any day in its original form over this in its original form, just because this one feels more organic. Now, we still have the problem of I have a finite number of pads and an infinite number of drum sounds I'm trying to emulate. And then in between that, we have the drum sample library, which is however many 100 or 1,000 or whatever samples in the pool. I only have a closed tip, closed edge, and open, like fully open sample mapped to my drum pad over here. So I still have the same problem of it's just closed, 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 open, 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 which sounds really weird. It's very strange. So right off the bat, you guessed it, I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to add that little sloshy slosh right there. Because I'm thinking as I'm playing like boom, ba, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, ba-doom, boom, ba. You know, like that last hit going into the next phrase as we're building up. I'm going to hit that thing a little harder, and I'm getting ready to open up the hi-hat. So I know that it's going to be some type of a little bit open right now. So that's what we want. And then immediately, second thing, same thing that we did over here, where we're going to, in fact, if you want, you can literally, if you're like me during a demonstration, you could just copy paste it. But I will not do that because I want to show you how I'm going to build it from scratch. So immediately, I'm just going to get rid of these guys. Delete button. We've got this one working how we want it. And then I think, like the other one, we're going to start on 1. Okay. And like I said, I like to use that last beat as the transition part. There we go. That's 4 right there, just for the record. Whoops. Trying to just grab these guys. Don't you love Pro Tools MIDI editor? Cool. Then, real quick, we're going to do the same thing that we've been done doing, which is we're going to accent each time the snare hits. So each beat 2. At least I'm counting this like 1, 2, 3, 4. So the snare is on 2 and 4. Let me get rid of the triplet grid. I'm going to go down to quarter notes, actually, just because it helps me to see. So I'm going to grab all of these that aren't, whoops, a snare hit. So it's literally just every other one, the 1 and the 3. And I'm gonna drag these guys down. So subtract, not too much, just a little bit. Say 8, sounds good to me. All right, cool. Neat. And then I want to do, oh, missed one. We're just going to accent that up rather than anything else. I don't know how aggressively you can close a hi-hat pedal. So I'm going to turn that down a little bit. And then real quick, we're going to do the same thing. Change velocity, and we're going to change smoothly by percentage, again, keeping the randomizing going. So remember, this is a build up. So I've done that to the hi-hat. It'd be a good idea also, in my opinion, to do it to the drums. Love that sound. And remember, we're just doing it by like a 10% shift over time with a randomization of 3, so it's pretty subtle. Oh, you know what? Since some of these are maxed out, I'm getting ahead of myself. So before I do that, I think it's a good idea to do that to the drums, though, as well, and not just the hi-hat, for the record. First thing that I'm going to do with a performance like this, where it's like too many things are maxed out, is I'm going to grab just those. So get ready. Love it. And I'm going to subtract and randomized. You guessed it. So if these are all at 127 and I want them to be energetic and everything, keep in mind we're about to build up. So I think what I'm going to do is subtract by like, oh, whoops, I was going the wrong way. Maybe like 15 overall. And then, or I'll tell you what, 10. Great. Let's do that. Okay, cool. with the randomize on. Now we're not at the ceiling anymore, so we have dynamic range. The other thing that we've got going on that's good and bad is that our ghost notes are a little more accurate. So that's a good thing. But they're not consistent because the pad isn't registering consistent. So that one's a little too powerful. Cool. Oop, this one as well. Those are a little much. Same with these. I like that they were that it was like little too powerful, a lot too powerful, way too powerful, because at least I'm building up. So that's actually conducive to the end product where the phrase is building as it goes on. Awesome. Now the fill bothers me just a tad. I rush a little too much here. Ba-ba-bum-bum. Yeah, so I'm going to use my nudge keys to just nudge those over. Cool. And then I'm going to nudge the downbeat of the next phrase over too. And just that symbol a little bit. Okay, cool. Awesome. That's very acceptable. All right, one more time from the beginning. Cool. Now I'm going to do a little bit of work on the snare roll here again. I'm fine with that being ahead of the beat. These are just off. The reason I'm fine with that being ahead of the beat is because everything within Vision is also ahead of the beat, and so I'm leaving that alone. If you're making music that's just like on the grid the whole time, that's not how music is actually played. I know some of you may argue that like, well, there's enough music out there that's been played like that now, and it's like, yes, but if you look at human beings making music, it's not just to the grid every single time. There are feels that you play with. Some lag behind the beat, some are in front of the beat. And so for something like this, where it's energetic building up, I'm gonna leave it ahead of the beat because that's gonna play into the human feeling of it, and it's also gonna play into the end product of the music, where it's gonna feel like I'm going somewhere. I'm building up. It's exciting. It's not just like nobody wants to listen to that. Well, at least I don't want to listen to that. I find it boring. I think a great performance by humans is better than a perfect performance by robots any day of the week. That bugs me. There. So again, not perfect, just roughly to the triplet grid, and I'm looking at like, okay, these are all a little ahead of the beat, so I'm leaving it alone. I'm not making it perfect. Praise the Lord for non-perfection. Good God. Awesome. And there's an art form to non-perfection too, because I'm sitting here editing drums, going really in depth, note by note, in an attempt to leave them alone as much as possible, or at least make them sound like I left them alone. Because I'll go in here deep for 3 hours, and this is a 50-minute tutorial already. I'll sit here and I'll do this for drums all day. But at the end, I don't want the super 100% quantized feel, and I don't want a sloppy feel either. So I want something in the middle that feels good. And I think we're pretty close to that. And you'll notice how much less time that took with the performance and just kind of molding it and shaping it into something because I'm embracing the imperfection and the flaws versus if I come over here and even this, you can see it's really pretty, it's like still really consistent, which may be something you want and may not be. And that's just dependent on the song you're producing. But this took a lot more time and effort to make it look like that and sound like that than this took. And most of this was just kind of fine tuning it and making sure, okay, you know, we got it kind of the way that we want. And again, if you just can't handle yourself, you just can't control it. That noise was for you. Then you can go in here and, sorry, not velocity. You can quantize it. You can go to the 16th note grid. I would suggest that you deselect your rolls and stuff like that. Mess with the strength. Maybe you want to tighten it up a little bit by 16%. I think that sounds fantastic, and I wouldn't touch that afterwards. The only way I would touch that is if I then put a human bass performance on top of that, and this was a problem, but I don't hear it being a problem. I hear that being a performance. This sounds really good too. They're two slightly different things. One sounds really, really good, tight, and like consistent. And the other one has its flaws. And it just depends on what kind of music you're making. I hope that you found this tutorial to be helpful. It's a very long one. And if you stuck with it, thank you. Thank you for watching. And I will see you guys in the next one.